Bueno, la política entonces, si
Politics, then, if we remember the analysis we did of the guerrilla struggle in Cuba, is not the art of the possible, but rather the art of making possible in the future what seems impossible at the present, not because we are wishful thinkers who desire changing in the future, but because we are realistic, because we start from the present reality, we analyze that reality and seek a way forward to change the correlation of forces. The correlation of forces must be changed. There's no victory without change in the correlation of forces. So the art of politics is precisely the capacity to create a correlation of forces increasingly more favorable to the revolutionary process. That is what throughout the history of humanity all revolutionary politicians have done. But this concept of politics as the building of forces, as the building of a new correlation of forces, is very distinct and operates in a very different way from politics considered as the art of the possible. This concept does not reduce politics to institutions. Usually, when one speaks of politics and politicians, one thinks of people who have posts in the parliament, in ministries, in judicial system, that is to say, positions of power. And because of that, to achieve more power, they must win more deputies to support their political group. So, alliances are made between party leaders and between political parties. Doing that, it is thought that the correlation of forces will change. That is not our concept of politics. In our vision of politics, we have to overcome the narrow concept of power. Politics is not just the state power, it's not just located in the state. Power is diffused through many parts of the society, in many sectors, in many fragments. For example, media power, as you know, is a fundamental power. The issue is how new expression of power can be raised from the base of the society. An enterprise abandoned by capitalists, which is taken over by the workers and begin to be self-managed, that is a creation of power. Same as when the peasants take over land from the large landowners, and when students' unions transform university, etc., etc. So power cannot simply be reduced to the state. This is something else to consider. Ultimately, and most importantly, if we define politics as the art of changing the correlation of forces, we should realize that the correlation of forces will not be changed solely with political forces. We must also create the necessary social forces, build social forces, which will enable you to strengthen your political force and defeat the opposition political force. So, this revolutionary politics is fundamentally focused on popular organization. There can be no revolutionary change in the correlation of forces if there is not an increasingly organized people.
Pero nos enfrentamos a un serio problema cuando
We
hablamos de
confront a
política.
serious problem when speaking about politics, and that is the skepticism of people towards politics and politicians. If you speak to people about parties, which is the reaction? Polls that has been done in Latin America shows that people reject party due to the existing partidocracy, the top-down decision-making, the perks which politicians get. And also there is much criticism of politics and politicians, and one of the reasons for these, among others, is that the right has appropriated the language of the left. They adopt our words, and so their speeches sounds very similar to our speeches. We can add to this something of our own doing, our own weakness, which is that when our politicians do politics, they often use the same political style as the right. That is, use the same patronage, the same personalization, etc. Then, when people hear very similar speeches and see very similar practices, why would they become enthusiastic about politicians and politics? That must be taken into account, and was taken by the leaders of PAIS, the movement that supports Presidente Correa. they, knowing this skepticism, built a political instrument tied to what they call the citizens' movement. I want also to clarify at this point that when I say we have to make possible what today seems impossible, I don't mean that everything is possible. There are goals that no amount of willpower can attain. But those goals, which are called utopian goals, are goals which act as beacons that lights the way. They are very important because as revolutionaries, hope is what motivates us. There should be an alternative for which to struggle. Isn't that right? For example, Marx set out that there would be full human development and complete equality in the future society, in the communist society, as he called it. That full human development, that full equality and liberty is something that is very difficult to achieve by everybody. But we have to strive towards that goal. We must keep moving forward and finding ways to overcome any obstacles in our path. Someone could think that to accept that goals are utopian goals is to be pessimist. I think the opposite. I believe that any action or step to the goal, for very small it is a step forward. In that sense, I am optimistic. I see how small action already go for show the new society. Now, to avoid wishful thinking, we must have reality as our start point. We must analyze what in politics is called the current situation, the current conjuncture. That is, those involved in politics must not only be capable of clarifying long-term goals, I want to build socialism, I want to liberate Cuba from Batista. No, we must know how to obtain our goals. And for that, we must know what is happening in the present reality in order to do so. So, a general orientation is not enough in politics. Concrete actions are necessary. And in addition, it is fundamental to be able to read a change in the correlation of forces, because correlations are not statics, they are always changing. When a qualitative change occurs, what is it that leads you to think the situation has changed? Because if the situation has changed, the instrument we use for doing politics must also change, as we will see in the future. So, before finishing this section, I want to tell you that throughout this talk, we will consider some aspects regarding how best to characterize the current situation. We have to analyze who are the opposing forces, how are these forces organized, what position is each one holding in this time, how are they operating, and which is the main motor or the main force.